I should have known better. After more than 50 years, I should have recognized the false notes in their voices when they called. My children, Chloe, the high-powered attorney, and Justin, the tech entrepreneur, had missed me. They wanted me to join them for a weekend at our old family property in the countryside, a place we hadn't visited together in nearly a decade. "It'll be good for you, Mom," Chloe had said. "You've been alone too long since Dad passed." When I pulled up to the old farmhouse that Friday afternoon, I felt a flutter of hope. Perhaps this was their way of reconnecting, of acknowledging that they'd been distant since their father's funeral 3 years ago. The place looked better than I remembered. Someone had hired landscapers to tame the once wild garden, and fresh paint brightened the exterior. Chloe greeted me with an air kiss beside my cheek. "Mom, finally! We thought you'd never make it. Did you bring the groceries I texted about?" "No, hello. No. How was your drive?" Just a demand disguised as a question. "I did," I replied, trying to mask my disappointment. "Let me get them from the car." "Great. Justin's on a call. He'll be busy most of the afternoon. I've got a brief to finish before dinner. The Wi-Fi password is on the fridge. Kitchen's stocked with coffee." And just like that, she disappeared back into the house, heels clicking against the hardwood floors that my husband and I had sanded and finished with our own hands 30 years ago. I stood in the driveway, the autumn sun warming my back, wondering what I was doing there. But I collected the grocery bags and walked inside, because that's what I've always done. Shown up, carried the load, made things work. The weekend unfolded like a slow-motion car crash. My children emerged from their respective work cocoons only for meals, which they criticized with the casual cruelty of people who have forgotten how to be grateful. "The pasta's overcooked," Justin commented Friday night, barely looking up from his phone. "The salad could use more acid," Chloe added, picking through the greens I'd dressed with my homemade vinaigrette. I bit my tongue and poured myself another glass of wine. Saturday morning, I woke early, as I always do. The farmhouse was quiet, my children still asleep in their childhood bedrooms. I made coffee and stepped onto the porch, watching the mist rise from the fields. This land had once been our dream, mine and John's. We'd planned to retire here, grow vegetables, keep chickens, host Sunday dinners for our children and the grandchildren we hoped they'd have. I felt John's absence like a physical pain. He would have known what to say to these strangers who carried our DNA, but seemed to have forgotten everything we'd taught them about kindness. When Chloe and Justin finally emerged around 10, they barely acknowledged me before setting up their laptops at the dining table. "The internet here is garbage," Justin complained within minutes. "How am I supposed to get anything done?" "It's the countryside," I reminded him gently. "Maybe it's a sign you should take a break. We could walk down to the creek like we used to." "Mom, we're not here on vacation," Chloe interrupted, her voice sharp. "We both have deadlines. We just thought a change of scenery might be nice." "A change of scenery," I repeated. "I see." I spent the day cleaning the house they'd neglected, finding dust in corners and mold in bathrooms. I weeded the garden beds near the house. I prepared another dinner that they ate distractedly, between checking emails. That night, I overheard them talking in the kitchen when they thought I'd gone to bed. "This was a mistake," Chloe said. "She's so slow now. Did you see how long it took her to prepare dinner?" "Yeah, and she keeps trying to get us to do these family bonding activities," Justin added. "I don't have time for that nostalgia trip." "Well, we're heading back early tomorrow," Chloe replied. "I told Colin I'd be home by 3 for that fundraiser." "You're not going to tell her tonight?" "No, she'll just get emotional. We'll tell her in the morning. She can take her time getting back to the city." I retreated to my bedroom, my heart hammering in my chest. I wasn't hurt. I was furious. How dare they speak about me that way? I had raised them better than this. John and I had sacrificed everything for them. Vacations we never took, dreams we postponed, retirement savings that funded their elite educations. I lay awake until dawn, remembering who I used to be before I became their mother. A woman with ambitions and talents of my own. A woman who had once been brave enough to buy this land with her husband when everyone said they were crazy to take on such a project. When I finally rose and went downstairs, I knew something was wrong before I even reached the kitchen. The house was too quiet. I called their names, checked their rooms, and found them empty. beds already made with military precision. In the kitchen, the coffee pot was still warm, mugs washed and placed in the dish rack. And on the counter, a note in Chloe's precise handwriting. "Mom, we had to head back early. Work emergency. You slow us down too much for us to wait. Take your time driving back. We've left the keys on the hook. Lock up when you leave." I read the note 3 times, my hands shaking with a rage I'd never allowed myself to feel in my entire life. They hadn't even had the courage to say it to my face. Outside, I noticed the old tractor John had never quite gotten around to restoring was still in the yard, rusting in the morning sun. Another abandoned project, another dream deferred. I walked over to it, the note clutched in my hand. The fuel cap was loose, as it had been for years. Without thinking, I unscrewed it completely, crumpled the note, and dropped it into the tank. A symbolic gesture, perhaps, but it felt right. I wouldn't be carrying their words with me anymore. Back in the house, I looked around at the property that had once represented our family's future. The deed was still in my name. I had never transferred ownership after John died, though I'd considered gifting it to my children. Standing in the kitchen, I made a decision that would change everything. I wouldn't be driving back to my small city apartment today. I wouldn't be calling my children to tell them how their words had hurt me. Instead, I picked up the phone and called a contractor I'd seen advertised on a billboard on my drive-in. "Hello," I said when a man answered. "I'd like a quote on some renovations. I've decided to move back to my farmhouse, and I want to make some changes." As I hung up, my phone buzzed with a text from Chloe. "Made it back to the city. Hope you're not upset about us leaving early. It was just easier this way." Easier for whom? I wondered. But I didn't respond. I had other plans now. Plans that didn't include being the convenient mother they could ignore until they needed something. They would discover, too late, that I wasn't the meek, accommodating woman they thought they knew. And by the time they realized what they'd thrown away, I would have already built something new from the ruins of our family. 3 months passed before I heard from my children again. 3 blissful, transformative months. The day after they abandoned me, I'd walked the entire property, 20 acres of possibilities that John and I had once dreamed about. The back 10 acres were still wooded, the creek running clear and cold along the eastern boundary. The front fields, once planted with corn and soybeans by the previous owner, had grown wild with prairie grasses and wildflowers. I stood in the center of the largest field and felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just land, it was opportunity. It was mine. That first week, I lived like a nomad in my own house, sleeping on the couch because the bedrooms felt haunted by my children's dismissal. I met with 3 contractors and hired Savannah, a woman about 10 years my junior who had started her own business after a divorce. "What exactly are you looking to do here?" she asked, her practical eyes scanning the property. "I'm not entirely sure," I admitted, "but I know I'm staying, and I know I need to make this place self-sufficient." Savannah nodded, not questioning my vague plans. Instead, she connected me with an agricultural consultant who specialized in small-scale farming. By the end of the month, I had a business plan for transforming the old family property into a micro-farm with a focus on heirloom vegetables and cut flowers. I withdrew money from my retirement account, enough to renovate the barn into a small commercial kitchen and to install solar panels that would reduce my dependence on the grid. Savannah's team worked quickly, and I learned to do what I could alongside them, rediscovering muscles I hadn't used in decades. During those first months, I ignored calls from my city friends who couldn't understand why I'd abandoned civilization. I changed my cell phone number, keeping the new one private except for necessary business contacts. I closed my social media accounts, tired of seeing my children's carefully curated lives that somehow never mentioned their mother. My only regular visitor was Luna, a neighbor half a mile down the road who had moved to the country 5 years earlier to start a beekeeping operation after 30 years as a corporate accountant. "They didn't expect you to take them at their word," Luna said one evening as we shared a bottle of wine on my newly rebuilt porch. I'd told her the bare bones of why I'd suddenly moved to the farmhouse. Children never do. They think parents are eternally patient, eternally forgiving. "I raised them to be independent," I replied. watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. I just never expected that independence to mean discarding me when I became inconvenient. So what now? Are you going to call them? Tell them what you're doing? I shook my head. Not yet. Maybe not ever. This is for me, not for them. By the end of January, the transformation was well underway. The barn renovation was complete, with a gleaming commercial kitchen that met all health department requirements for small-scale food production. I'd taken courses on sustainable agriculture and food preservation. I'd spent evenings developing recipes for the jams and pickles I planned to sell at farmers' markets come summer. I was in the middle of transplanting seedlings in the newly constructed greenhouse when my cell phone rang with an unknown number. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, but I was expecting a call from a restaurant chef interested in buying my early spring greens. "Hello?" I answered, balancing the phone between my ear and shoulder as I continued working. "Mom? Is that you?" Chloe's voice froze me in place. I hadn't heard it in 3 months, and the familiar cadence, so much like my own, sent a jolt through my system. "Yes," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "How did you get this number?" "I had to go through your old neighbor, Mrs. Peterson. She said you'd moved. What's going on? Why did you change your number without telling us?" I took a deep breath, setting down the tray of seedlings. "I didn't think you'd notice." "Of course we noticed." Her voice rose with indignation. "We've been worried sick. Justin drove by your apartment last week and your name wasn't on the mailbox anymore." "How unfortunate that you wasted a trip," I said, surprised by my own coolness. "If you'd called first, I could have saved you the trouble." "Mom, what's going on? Where are you living? Do you need help?" The concern in her voice sounded genuine, but I remembered the note. "You slow us down." Those words had become a sort of mantra for me, fueling my resolve during the hardest days of the renovation. "I'm living at the farmhouse," I said. "And no, I don't need help. I'm doing quite well, actually." Silence stretched between us. I could almost hear her mind working, trying to make sense of this information. "The farmhouse? You mean the weekend place? But it's the middle of winter. It's not winterized properly. The heating system is ancient." "I've made some improvements," I said simply. "What kind of improvements?" "Mom, is this about what happened at Thanksgiving?" "Look, we shouldn't have left without saying goodbye, but we had obligations in the city. You know how it is." "I do know how it is," I agreed. "And I have obligations here now, too." "Was there something specific you needed, Chloe?" Another silence. Longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had that tight quality it got when she was trying to control her anger. "Actually, yes. Justin and I were thinking of using the property for a corporate retreat weekend in April. His company is looking for a rural location for team building, and I remembered how much land we have there. It would be perfect." My free hand curled into a fist. Of course. They hadn't called because they missed me. They had called because they wanted something. "We have?" I repeated. Interesting choice of words, considering the property is solely in my name. "You know what I mean, Mom. It's the family place. We grew up there." "You grew up in the suburbs," I corrected her. "We visited here occasionally. And no, I'm afraid April won't work. Or any other month for that matter." "What? Why not?" "Because it's not available for corporate retreats. It's my home now, and my business." "Your business? What are you talking about?" I looked around the greenhouse, at the neat rows of seedlings that would soon grow into the produce that would support my independence. At the handwritten labels marking heirloom varieties I'd sourced from seed savers across the country. At the life I was building without them. "Chloe, I have to go. I have seedlings to transplant and a meeting with a restaurant owner in an hour. If there's nothing else..." "Mom, wait. We need to talk about this. If you're having some kind of, I don't know, delayed reaction to Dad's death or something, we can help. Maybe you should see someone. A therapist." "I am seeing someone," I interrupted. "Several people, actually. A business advisor, an agricultural consultant, and a very good attorney who's helping me update my will." The sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line gave me a satisfaction I immediately felt guilty about, but not guilty enough to soften. "Give my best to Justin," I said. "Goodbye, Chloe." I ended the call and stood in the warm, humid air of the greenhouse, my heart racing. They would come now, I knew. They wouldn't be able to help themselves. The mention of the will would bring them running, not because they needed my money, but because they couldn't stand the idea that I had made decisions without consulting them. And when they came, they would find more than a changed woman. They would find a changed place, one where they no longer had any right to dictate terms. I returned to my seedlings, carefully transferring the fragile plants to larger pots where they would have room to grow strong. Outside, the winter sun glinted off the solar panels on the barn roof. In the distance, I could see Savannah's truck approaching, likely bringing the plans for the farm stand we were going to build near the road. This was my rebirth, my reclamation, and it had only just begun. I just had to prepare for the storm that was coming. My children, who had never taken no for an answer their entire privileged lives, especially from their accommodating mother. But they were about to learn that the woman they had left behind at the farmhouse no longer existed. The question was, what would they do when they realized that their safety net had transformed into a woman they didn't recognize? A woman who had finally chosen herself. They arrived on a Saturday morning in early March, just as I was preparing to transplant my first tomato seedlings into the high tunnel greenhouse Savannah's team had finished the week before. I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway and knew without looking that it would be the sleek black SUV Chloe favored or Justin's electric sports car. It was both. I didn't stop what I was doing. The seedlings needed to be in the ground today, and the forecast promised rain by evening. Perfect transplanting weather. I had learned over the past months to work with nature's timetable, not against it. "Mom?" Justin's voice carried across the yard, a mixture of confusion and alarm. "What the hell is all this?" I straightened up slowly, mindful of my back, and turned to face my children. They stood side by side at the entrance to the high tunnel, looking so out of place in their city clothes that I almost laughed. Chloe in her tailored wool coat and leather boots, Justin in what he probably considered casual wear, designer jeans and a sweater that likely cost more than I now spent on groceries in a month. "Hello," I said calmly. "If you're staying, you might want to change into something more practical. I have extra work gloves." They exchanged a look I recognized from their childhood, the one that said, "Mom's being weird again." "We're not here to garden," Chloe said, her eyes scanning the property with growing dismay. "We're here to talk about what you've been doing. The neighbors told us you've been making all sorts of changes." "Yes," I confirmed, turning back to my seedlings. "Quite a few." "Mom, can you stop that for a minute and talk to us?" Justin stepped closer, his expensive shoes sinking slightly into the soft ground. "We drove 3 hours to get here. And I drove 3 hours to the farmhouse in November, only to be abandoned without so much as a goodbye," I replied, my voice steady. "But you're right. We should talk." I peeled off my gardening gloves and led them to the house. They followed in stunned silence, taking in the solar panels on the barn roof, the newly constructed greenhouse, the tilled fields where cover crops grew green in the early spring sunshine. Inside, the farmhouse was almost unrecognizable from their last visit. The dated kitchen had been replaced with a more functional layout featuring butcher block countertops and open shelving filled with canning jars. The living room furniture had been rearranged around the original fireplace, which now had a new energy-efficient insert. Maps and planting schedules covered the dining room table. "Would you like coffee?" I asked, washing my hands at the sink. "What we'd like is an explanation," Chloe said, her lawyer voice emerging. "You've clearly spent a fortune here. Where did the money come from? Your retirement savings?" I filled the kettle and set it on the stove. "Some, yes. The rest was from the life insurance policy your father left. I was planning to use it to move to a retirement community eventually, but I found I preferred this option." Justin paced the kitchen, picking things up and setting them down like he was cataloging evidence. "So all this, the renovations, the farming equipment, this is some kind of retirement project for you?" "Not a project," I corrected him. "A business. A life." "Mom, be realistic," Chloe interjected. "You're 68 years old. You have no experience in farming or running a business. What happens when you can't manage the physical labor anymore? When the money runs out?" I poured hot water over the coffee grounds in the French press John had given me for our 35th anniversary. I have partners and contingency plans. Savannah, the contractor who's been doing the renovations, is investing in the business, and Luna from down the road is merging her beekeeping operation with my vegetable production. You're going into business with strangers? Justin's voice rose in disbelief. Have you had a lawyer look at these arrangements? Do you have contracts? What about taxes? I pressed down the plunger on the coffee and poured 3 mugs. Milk and sugar are on the table, I said, ignoring his questions. Now, why don't we discuss the real reason for your visit? It's not concern for my financial well-being. You've both made it clear that my welfare isn't your priority. Chloe's face flushed. That's not fair. We've been worried sick about you. You disappeared? Changed your phone number? Disappeared? I raised an eyebrow. Like you both did that Sunday morning, leaving nothing but a note telling me I was too slow. Too much of a burden to even merit a goodbye? Justin had the grace to look ashamed, but Chloe pressed on. We apologized for that. It was inconsiderate. Inconsiderate, I repeated, savoring the inadequacy of the word. Yes, I suppose it was. Just like it's inconsiderate of me to make changes to the property without consulting you. The difference is, I own this land. My name is on the deed. Your father and I paid for it with money we earned while raising you both. You, on the other hand, have no legal claim here. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Justin sipped his coffee, avoiding my eyes. Chloe's lawyer mask slipped, revealing the little girl who had always believed she could argue her way into getting what she wanted. Mom, she said finally, her voice softer, we're worried about you. This seems extreme. Is this really what you want? To isolate yourself out here, working yourself to exhaustion? I almost laughed. Isolated. I have more meaningful connections now than I've had in years. The farmers market community, my business partners, the local restaurant owners who are eager to buy what I grow, and as for exhaustion, I gestured to my arms, which had developed muscle definition I hadn't seen since my 30s. I'm stronger now than I was when you left me here, both physically and otherwise. And what about us? Justin asked quietly. Do we fit into this new life of yours at all? The question caught me off guard. In all my planning, all my reimagining of my future, I had deliberately avoided thinking about my children's place in it. The hurt had been too raw, the betrayal too fresh. That depends, I said at last, on whether you can accept that I'm no longer the woman whose only purpose was to serve your needs. On whether you can see me as a whole person, not just your mother. Chloe's eyes filled with tears. It was a manipulation tactic she'd used since childhood, the quick tears that made everyone rush to comfort her. But I sat still, waiting. This is about that stupid note, isn't it? She said, her voice tight. We made a mistake. We were stressed and busy. Are you really going to throw away our entire relationship over one thoughtless morning? No, I said, meeting her gaze steadily. I'm not throwing away anything. I'm building something new. You're welcome to be part of it, but only on new terms. Terms where I matter as much as you do. Justin looked between us, then stood abruptly. I need some air, he muttered, heading for the door. Chloe made no move to follow him. Instead, she leaned forward, her face hardening into the expression she probably used to intimidate opposing counsel. Mom, I need to ask you something directly, and I want an honest answer. Have you removed Justin and me from your will? So there it was, the real concern, laid bare at last. I've made changes, I admitted, but not the ones you're worried about. You're both still included. The difference is that this property and the business I'm building here will pass to my partners upon my death, not to you. They've invested their time, expertise, and faith in me. They've earned it. Chloe's face went pale. But this land is our heritage. It's been in the family for less than 30 years, I interrupted. Your father and I bought it. We didn't inherit it. And now I'm putting it to use in a way that honors his memory and my future simultaneously. Before she could respond, the kitchen door opened and Justin stepped back inside. But he wasn't alone. Savannah stood beside him, her weathered face curious but not unfriendly. Sorry to interrupt, she said, but the seedling delivery just arrived, and we need to know where you want the new berry bushes planted. I rose from my chair, grateful for the interruption. I'll show you. Chloe, we can continue this conversation later if you'd like, or you can join us outside and see what we're creating here. I walked out without waiting for her answer, leaving her sitting at the kitchen table with her cooling coffee and her shattered assumptions. As I stepped into the sunshine, I heard footsteps behind me, but didn't turn to see which of my children had chosen to follow. In that moment, I realized it didn't matter. I would keep moving forward either way. It was Justin who followed me outside, his expression a mixture of confusion and something else. Curiosity, perhaps. Chloe remained in the kitchen, no doubt strategizing her next approach. She had always been methodical, even as a child, planning 3 moves ahead in every game we played. "So," Justin said, falling into step beside me as we walked toward Savannah and the delivery truck, "you're really doing this, becoming a farmer at retirement age." I glanced at him, noting the lack of judgment in his voice. "Among other things, the farm is just part of it." Savannah waved as we approached. She'd already started unloading trays of berry bushes, raspberries, blackberries, and blueberries that would form the border of what would eventually become a pick-your-own operation. "Your son's been asking about the solar setup," Savannah said, handing Justin a pair of work gloves. "Seems impressed by the system." Justin accepted the gloves automatically, looking surprised at being drafted into work. "It's a good installation," he admitted. "Probably more efficient than the setup I have at my cabin in Colorado." I raised an eyebrow, unable to hide my surprise. "You have a cabin? Since when?" A flush crept up his neck. "About a year ago. It's nothing fancy, just a place to decompress from work." "You never mentioned it," I said, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. Another piece of his life he hadn't thought to share with me. Justin stared at the ground. "Yeah. Well, we haven't exactly been having deep conversations these past few years, have we?" Savannah, sensing the tension, tactfully moved away to direct the delivery driver about where to place the remaining plants. I picked up a blueberry bush, checking its root system. "No, we haven't," I agreed. "But that goes both ways, Justin. I didn't disappear from your lives. You and Chloe got busy with your careers, your relationships, your lives. I understood that. I never pressured you. Maybe you should have," he said quietly. "Dad was always the one who insisted on family dinners, holiday gatherings. After he died, it was easy to let those things slide. You never complained." I dug a hole for the blueberry bush, making it twice as wide as the root ball. "I didn't want to be a burden," I said, the words bitter in my mouth. "That worked out well, didn't it?" Justin knelt beside me, awkwardly using a trowel to help widen the hole. "Mom, about that note, I don't want an apology 4 months after the fact," I interrupted. "What I want is for you to understand why it hurt so much. It wasn't just the words. It was that neither of you saw me as a person in my own right. I became an inconvenience to be managed." Justin was silent as we planted the bush together, firming the soil around its base. Finally, he said, "When did Chloe and I become such entitled jerks?" The blunt question startled a laugh out of me. "You're asking the woman who raised you? That might be a dangerous question." "I'm serious," he insisted. "We weren't always like this. I remember when Dad got sick, how we rallied. Chloe and I took turns flying home, coordinating his care, supporting you." "You did," I acknowledged, reaching for another plant. "You were both wonderful during that time. And then he died, and we just went back to our lives and left you to figure it out alone." He shook his head. "That's pretty shitty behavior when I say it out loud." I couldn't disagree, so I remained silent, focusing on the task at hand. We worked side by side, planting 6 bushes before I spoke again. "Your father was the center of our family," I said finally. "When he died, I think we all lost our bearings. You and Chloe retreated into your work. I retreated into the role of the undemanding mother who didn't want to burden her successful children." "And now?" Justin asked, gesturing at the transformed property. "Now I'm finding out who I am without him, without either of you defining me." He nodded slowly. "I can respect that." He paused, looking back toward the house. "Chloe's not going to take this as well as I am." "No," I agreed. "She won't." As if on cue, the screen door slammed, and Chloe emerged from the house, her phone pressed to her ear, her free hand gesticulating as she paced the porch. Even from a distance, I could see she was in full lawyer mode. "Who is she calling?" I asked. Justin sighed. "Probably her paralegal, or her husband, or her therapist. Hard to say. Chloe's solution to everything is to call in reinforcements." "What's yours?" I asked, genuinely curious. He smiled ruefully. "Historically? Avoidance. Hence the cabin in Colorado I conveniently never mentioned." He glanced at the work we'd done, the neat row of newly planted berry bushes. "This is different, though. I can't just avoid this." "No," I agreed. "You can't." Chloe marched across the yard toward us, her face set in determined lines. "Mom, we need to talk. Privately." I brushed the dirt from my hands. "Whatever you have to say, you can say it in front of your brother. And Savannah, for that matter. She's my business partner and friend." Chloe's jaw tightened. "Fine. I've been doing some research. The changes you've made to this property without proper permits could constitute code violations. The commercial kitchen, the farm stand you're planning, these require specific zoning approvals. And I'm not convinced you've followed proper procedures." I felt a flare of anger, quickly replaced by a strange calm. This was the Chloe I knew, the one who used her legal knowledge as a weapon when she felt threatened. "Actually," Savannah spoke up, stepping forward, "we've secured all necessary permits. I've been working closely with the county. Everything is above board." Chloe barely glanced at her. "Even so, converting a residential property to a commercial enterprise carries tax implications that I doubt Mom has considered. And there are liability issues." "Chloe," Justin interrupted. "Stop." She turned on him, eyes flashing. "I'm trying to protect Mom from making costly mistakes." "No," he said firmly. "You're trying to control the situation because you're upset that Mom did something significant without consulting us. But here's the thing. She doesn't need our permission. This is her land. Her life." Chloe's face flushed. "That's not—" "It is," he insisted. "And we both know it. We've treated Mom like an afterthought for years, and now we're shocked that she's built a life that doesn't revolve around us." I stared at my son, surprised by his insight and even more by his willingness to confront his sister. Justin had always been the peacekeeper, the one who avoided conflict at all costs. "This isn't about control," Chloe insisted, but her voice had lost some of its conviction. "I'm worried about Mom overextending herself, getting taken advantage of by these people she barely knows. These people," I said quietly, "have shown me more respect in 4 months than you have in 4 years. They see me as capable, not as a burden who slows things down." Chloe flinched as I echoed the words from her note. "Mom," she began, her tone softening, "I know we hurt you. That note was thoughtless and cruel. But please don't make permanent decisions based on one mistake. This isn't about revenge, Chloe. It's about growth. For the first time since your father died, I have a purpose that's entirely my own. I'm not just someone's mother or someone's widow. But what if it fails?" she pressed. "What if you sink all your savings into this farm fantasy, and it doesn't work out? Where will you go? What will you do?" Before I could answer, Savannah spoke up again. "Your mother has already turned a profit on her winter greens. 3 restaurants in the city have standing orders for her produce. The commercial kitchen will be used for processing value-added products, jams, pickles, sauces, that extend the selling season. We've developed a solid business plan." Chloe seemed taken aback by this information. She looked at me with new eyes, as if seeing a stranger. "You've really thought this through?" "Yes," I said simply. "I have." Justin cleared his throat. "So what happens now? What do you want from us, Mom?" It was the question I'd been asking myself ever since I'd seen their cars pull into the driveway. What did I want from my children? Apologies? Support? Or simply acknowledgement of who I had become? "I want you to see me," I said finally. "Not as your mother who needs protecting or managing, but as a woman with her own dreams and capabilities. If you can do that, then there's a place for you here. Not as owners or controllers, but as family." Chloe's face remained troubled, but Justin nodded slowly. I'd like that, he said, to know this version of you. For a moment, I allowed myself to feel a glimmer of hope. Perhaps something new could grow from the ashes of our old relationship, something healthier, more balanced. Then Chloe straightened her shoulders, her lawyer persona sliding back into place. I still think we should review the business agreements and permits, just to be safe. And I'd like to see this new will you mentioned. And just like that, the moment was gone. I sighed, unsurprised but disappointed. Chloe, I said gently, you're not listening. I'm not asking for your professional services or your approval. I'm asking for your respect. If you can't give me that, then I think it's best if you leave until you can. The ultimatum hung in the air between us. Justin looked anxiously from me to his sister, while Savannah pretended to be deeply interested in the remaining berry bushes. Chloe's expression hardened, her vulnerability replaced by a cold fury I recognized from her childhood tantrums. So that's it? Either I accept all this without question, or I'm not welcome? After everything we've been through as a family? No, I said firmly. You're welcome to ask questions, to express concerns, as my daughter, not as my lawyer. But what you're not welcome to do is undermine my decisions or treat me like I'm incompetent. She stared at me for a long moment, then turned abruptly and began walking back to the house. Chloe, wait, Justin called after her. Let her go, I said quietly. She needs time to adjust to the new reality. As we watched her retreating figure, I wondered if I had just lost my daughter. And more troubling still, I wondered why the possibility didn't devastate me as it once would have. What I didn't know then was that Chloe wasn't simply retreating to lick her wounds. She was regrouping, and what she would do next would force me to decide once and for all what mattered most: my newfound independence, or the family I had spent a lifetime building. 3 weeks after Chloe and Justin's visit, I received a certified letter from a law firm in the city. I recognized the name, Harrington and Associates, one of Chloe's former colleagues. My hands trembled slightly as I signed for the envelope, though I had been half expecting something like this. Inside was a formal notice challenging my mental competency to manage my own affairs, citing erratic behavior and concerning financial decisions. The letter mentioned a court date scheduled for the following month. Chloe had done exactly what I feared. She had decided to force my hand through legal means. I sat heavily at my kitchen table, the official-looking papers spread before me. The sunlight streaming through the windows suddenly felt cold. After everything I'd said, everything I'd shown her about my new life, she still couldn't, or wouldn't, see me as competent. I called Savannah first, then Luna. They arrived within the hour, bearing a bottle of wine and righteous indignation on my behalf. She can't possibly win, Savannah said, examining the papers. You're clearly of sound mind. The business is already profitable. There's no basis for this. It's not about winning, I said, understanding my daughter in a way they couldn't. It's about forcing me to respond, to engage on her terms. Even if the case gets thrown out, I'll have to hire an attorney, appear in court, defend my choices. She's creating a situation where I have to treat her as significant again. Luna poured 3 glasses of wine. So, what will you do? I sipped my wine, considering my options. I could fight it, of course, and probably win. But at what cost? More bitterness, more division. I shook my head. There has to be another way. Before I could elaborate, my phone rang. It was Justin. Mom, he said when I answered, his voice tight with anger. Did you get a letter from Harrington? Yes. I had nothing to do with this. I just found out. Chloe didn't even tell me she was planning it. I closed my eyes, feeling suddenly tired. I didn't think you were involved, Justin. I've been trying to talk to her ever since we left your place, but she's shut me out. She's convinced herself that someone is manipulating you, that this whole farm thing is some kind of, I don't know, delayed grief reaction or something. And what do you think? I asked. A pause. I think my sister needs to accept that our mother is a whole person with her own dreams. Another pause. And I think I'd like to come back out there, if that's okay. Not to interfere, just to see what you're building. Maybe help a little if you need it. The offer, so hesitantly made, brought tears to my eyes. I'd like that, I said simply. After we hung up, I looked at Savannah and Luna. "I think I know what to do," I said. 2 days before the scheduled court hearing, I invited Chloe to meet me at a coffee shop halfway between the farm and the city. I was surprised when she agreed, even more surprised when she showed up alone, without her lawyer or her husband. She looked tired, I noticed as she slid into the booth across from me. The confident, polished attorney seemed diminished somehow, with dark circles under her eyes and her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail instead of her usual sleek style. "Thank you for coming," I said, pushing a latte toward her. Still her favorite after all these years. "I almost didn't," she admitted, wrapping her hands around the warm mug but not drinking. "Justin's been calling me nonstop, telling me I'm making a huge mistake." "Are you?" I asked gently. She met my eyes, her expression a mixture of defiance and uncertainty. "I'm trying to protect you." "No, Chloe. You're trying to control me because my choices make you uncomfortable." She flinched. "That's not fair, isn't it?" I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. "I've brought some things I want you to see." Inside were photographs, dozens of them, chronicling the transformation of the farm over the past 5 months. The renovated barn, the thriving greenhouse, me, standing proudly beside Savannah and Luna at the first farmers market of the season, our booth overflowing with early spring greens. Chloe flipped through them slowly. "You look happy," she said finally. "I am," I replied. "For the first time since your father died, I have a purpose that's entirely my own." "But why didn't you talk to us first? We could have helped, invested in this venture if that's what you wanted." I smiled sadly. "Because I needed to do this by myself, for myself, to prove that I could, and because you and Justin made it very clear that this property and me were not priorities in your lives." "One bad weekend," she muttered. "One thoughtless note." "It wasn't just that weekend," I said quietly. "It was 3 years of obligatory holiday visits. 3 years of you both treating me like an afterthought. 3 years of me shrinking myself to fit into the corners of your busy lives." She looked away, her jaw tight. "So this is punishment." "No, Chloe. This is growth. Mine, not yours." I took a deep breath. I had my attorney draw up new papers. "I'm creating a family trust that includes provisions for both you and Justin in my will, but maintains the farm as an independent entity to be managed by my business partners after I'm gone. You're welcome to review the documents." I slid another folder across the table. "And here are the financials for the farm. Quarterly projections, current contracts with restaurants and markets, expenses and profits. Everything is transparent and above board." Chloe stared at the folders but didn't open them. "And if I go forward with the competency hearing, then you'll lose," I said simply. "Not just the case, but me. Because I won't allow myself to be treated as incompetent or incapable by anyone, not even my daughter." The ultimatum hung between us. Chloe's eyes filled with tears. Real ones this time, not the manipulative kind she'd perfected as a child. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "Of what?" I asked. "Of losing you. Of not being important to you anymore." My heart softened. "Oh, Chloe, you're my child. You'll always be important to me, but not at the expense of my own identity, my own happiness." She wiped her eyes, embarrassed by her own emotion. "Justin said he's been helping you plant things." I smiled. "He has. He's surprisingly good at it for a tech executive. Comes out every other weekend. Says the soil grounds him, no pun intended." A small, reluctant smile tugged at her lips. "And is there something I could do? If I wanted to be involved?" It was the question I'd been waiting for, hoping for. Not an outright apology, but an opening. A sign that my daughter was finally seeing me as a person with agency and value. "The farm stand opens next weekend," I said carefully. "I could use someone with a head for numbers to help manage the cash box." She nodded slowly. "I could do that, just for the day, to see how it goes." "That would be wonderful," I said, meaning it. As we parted outside the coffee shop, Chloe hesitated, then gave me an awkward hug. "I'll call Harrington tomorrow and withdraw the filing," she murmured against my shoulder. "Thank you," I said, hugging her back. A year to the day after my children abandoned me at the farmhouse, We gathered on the newly built deck behind the house. Chloe and her husband, Justin and his new girlfriend, Savannah and Luna, and their families. The farm had survived its first full season, weathering late frosts and summer droughts to produce a bountiful harvest. As I looked around at the full table, at the faces lit by the golden autumn light, I realized that I had harvested more than vegetables and fruits from this land. I had cultivated a new sense of self, a community of choice, and perhaps most surprisingly, a healthier relationship with my children. They had learned to see me as a woman, not just their mother, and I had learned that standing my ground didn't mean standing alone. Chloe caught my eye across the table and raised her glass in a subtle toast. I nodded, acknowledging how far we'd come. Not all the way, perhaps. Old habits die hard, and we still had moments of tension, but far enough that the future stretched before us with new possibility. That note they'd left me, "You slow us down," had become a bitter gift, forcing me to confront my own complicity and how my children viewed me. In trying to never be a burden, I had allowed myself to become invisible. No more. As the sun set over my flourishing fields, I silently thanked that old rusting tractor where I had burned their cruel note a year ago. From those ashes, something unexpected had bloomed. Not just a business or a home, but a version of myself I had never known existed. Strong, capable, complete, and entirely my own.